I'd like to call the April 19th, 2021 County Commission Board to order at this time. And if you desire, please pray with me. Our Heavenly Father, Almighty God, we pray for your intervention and guidance in our decisions made here today by this board, and may they be honorable to you and in the best interests of the entire county. Bless those that are in foreign lands in jeopardy of losing their lives to defend us for the freedoms that we have to meet as we do today. Bless each and every one in our military and our public servants today. We pray, guide us. In your holy name we pray. Amen. And I'll ask Commissioner Palmer, if you would, to lead our pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on our agenda is discussion, adjustment, or approval of the agenda as presented. Have any comments or additions? If none, do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Have a motion to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None motion carried. As normal at this point in our commission meetings, we do have a informal comment period of 10 minutes provided for public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone signed up for?
We have 4 individuals signed up. The first one to speak is Ms. Cindy Martin.
I have 4, so kind of keep a tab on. Good morning, Ms. Martin. But, maybe 2 to 2.5 minutes apiece, something like that. Thank you.
I came out this morning just to remind you guys not to lose sight of where we all stood in the fall. 4 of us, or 4 of you stood with me at the campaign polls, and we discussed making this county prosper. We talked about supporting the mega site, and as the wife of someone employed with Duke Energy, that's dear to my heart. Do I know if the mega site will save Duke? I don't know that. What I do know is that if we fill that mega park, we could provide these Duke employees with jobs that would be comparable to the ones that they have now. If we lose the mega park and we lose Duke, we're in trouble as a county. So I just want to remind you of the promises you made to the voters. We all made them. We all ran on the same premise. And I'm just asking you to think about that as you move forward planning for the county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Next, we have Cynthia Lynch.
Good morning. I'd like to yield my time to John Sepp, please. Thank you.
Yep, our third one to sign up is John Seep.
Good morning, Board.
Morning.
How are you all today?
Excellent.
Very good.
Awesome. A couple of months ago, I took the opportunity to address this board prior to departing to Florida, expressing my hopes that upon my return, I could address you all, commending you on your actions bettering the community. So let me begin. Commissioner Gentry, thank you for your continuous focus and tenacity in getting the EDC task force up and running. It appears to be moving along smoothly, and I personally am looking forward to the recommendations from which forth their corporate efforts come. Each of these private citizens are volunteering and dedicating personal time to perform this task, and it's time consuming. It's an important task for every citizen in this county. And to the task force members, I say thank you. Commissioner Palmer, Commissioner Gentry, I'd like to thank you both for voting against the removal of a private citizen who is doing a great job as a volunteer on the EDC, asking pertinent and appropriate questions, which apparently provoked and disturbed a few here on the dais. Commissioner Gentry, I was appalled to watch as you asked for justification for the motion by Commissioner Sims and you being ignored. Your closing comments were measured and appropriate. I commend you for demanding proper conduct of the meeting and basic information on which to determine your vote, yet not receiving it from the chairman or others. Commissioner Sims, less than 2 months ago, you personally stood up in a public session emotionally and pointedly declaring that if anyone had an issue or problem with you, that they should call you. Is this an accurate statement? Hearing nothing, it is. Is this the way you would like to be treated and expect to be treated? I'll assume yes. Where I was raised, you treated others as you would like to be treated. While in the Boy Scouts on my way to achieving Eagle Scout, my father was an assistant scoutmaster. Like all boys, there were times when I stepped out of line. And my behavior needed to be addressed along with any others that I was with at the time that were equally out of line. Effort was made by my father to ensure that my discipline was not less, but actually more than the others. He was not going to be viewed as treating me better because he was my father. So yes, I realize that all of you are Republicans as I am, which means you more than others should know proper applications of standards and principles. So let me ask you, Commissioner Sims, did you contact Liz Bradshaw to discuss any issues or concerns which brought you to the motion you presented? I know you didn't. Why not? To me, it appears you have one standard for yourself and another for others. How would you feel if you asked a simple question, not technical in nature, asking another commissioner why they're making a motion and being ignored? What would you think? Does this reflect the behavior of a board properly functioning, being transparent in the working of the business of the county? To me, not at all, sir. Are you prepared to inform Commissioner Gentry and the citizens of the county why you made the motion to remove Ms. Bradshaw? Commissioner Puryear, did you know the reasoning behind Commissioner Sims' motion? Not hearing anything. I can only make assumptions. How did you know? If you didn't know, why did you vote to remove Ms. Bradshaw? Did you think Commissioner Gentry and the citizens of Person County deserve an answer as to why this volunteer should be removed from the EDC? Hard not to observe that both Ms. Bradshaw and Commissioner Gentry are women. Seems to some of us observing casually, they are both asking appropriate questions and getting ignored, or worse, scorned and slandered. How would you like it if you were treated this way? You are the exalted ruler of an organization locally which seems to pride itself in not having any women in its membership, and they're allowed. I think you and others here need to step back and reflect on how you are treating Commissioner Gentry and other women like Ms. Bradshaw. Chairman Powell, how are you, sir?
I'm sorry.
Do you believe that pushing the vote without a proper answer being provided to Commissioner Gentry last session was proper? Are you not to ensure the integrity of the process so that we have confidence in the process? How were either Commissioner Gentry or Powell to vote without cause being provided? You need to help the rest of the citizens of the county understand, because no one seems to think your actions were proper last session. What do you view as the role of chairman on this board? Is this really what you consider transparency in the conduct of public business in the county? Should any citizen be treated like this by any commissioner? How should citizens hold you and others here accountable, if not in this manner? Sorry, that's the way it goes. Where is all this business being done? Because it's not being conducted openly in front of the public as seen in your last session. This creates negative publicity for the boards, diminishes the public trust and the confidence in our local government representatives, at least you three. Good morning, attorney. Can you please ensure that all closed sessions meet the requirements for conducting a closed session and that only items allowed in closed session be discussed during closed session? Can you also give us, prior to the closed session, the nature of the session, with a comment afterwards attesting that nothing other than the matter for the closed session was in fact covered behind closed doors away from the public's review? In closing, it appears that as if three of our commissioners lack transparency and have little desire to conduct the business of the county in front of the citizens of Person County. This leaves us, the citizens, wondering why. What are you trying to hide and why? Who is running things? Where is business being conducted? Citizens aren't getting straight answers. Commissioners aren't even getting straight answers. So intensive scrutiny is in order. If Commissioner Gentry can't get a proper answer to a straightforward question, should any of us citizens think we will get anything better? Think about that. So here's what I'm looking for. Can the citizens have a proper session and some come to Jesus honesty coming forth from this board today and going forward? Person County citizens can handle the truth. What we can't handle is more monkey business, more window dressing, and contemptible behavior. It was obvious my father wanted to be clear that no favoritism was given in his disciplining and strictness with me. It is my hope that I've been equally self-controlled and restrained in my addressing the three commissioners' contemptuous and impertinent conduct at the last meeting. Thank you for your time and your respect.
Our last speaker is
John.
Chris Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Excuse me? That concludes our comments.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Item number 1 on the agenda is discussion adjustment for approval of the consent agenda. No discussion or adjustment. Do we have a motion for approval of the consent agenda as presented?
Motion to approve.
Have a motion to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Item number 2, debt model. Manager York and Finance Director Amy.
I'm going to introduce the item, and then I'm going to hand it over to the financial advisors that the county has been working with now for a couple of years. We have engaged the services of DEC Associates, primarily Doug Carter, who is joining us via Zoom, and Andrew Carter, who is with us here this morning. And we are trying to develop a debt model so that we can better understand our capacity to take on debt to fund some of the very large school project needs that are on our horizon. So what we'd like to do today is introduce the model to you and show you how various amounts of debt impact your ability to pay and the need for additional revenues to support the debt service. So I'm going to hand it over to Andrew, and both Amy and I are available for questions. We have given DEC Associates all of our financial documents, all of the requested needs from the school, which is right now around $38 million worth of needs. And we're trying to figure out over time how we can afford to fund those. So Andrew, if you'll start, and then we are happy to entertain various scenarios of varying amounts of debt and let you see the impact of those on our financials.
Definitely. Thank you again for having us here today. Doug and I were here in your March work session, if you'll remember. The room was turned around. We were presenting from that side. But we're here to give the actual update to the numbers that we were talking about last time. We've talked about the model a good number of times now, but now we're getting to the nitty gritty and actually seeing how it looks and operates. So I'll go very quickly through the couple of slides we have here today.
And I'll mention that you have a hard copy of the slides as well as some numbers that we'll go over in a minute at your seats. It's the very same thing that the public will see. A little switch on the side inward. Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you again for having us here today. Again, to remind you all, the county hired us, DEC Associates, to come in and take a look at the debt affordability of the county, given that there were some needs coming from the schools. You have already implemented and established what we call the Capital Investment Fund, the CIF fund. And that's the fund of which all the revenues and expenditures will flow through on your CAFR and your books to be able to do the model and the debt that we're presenting today. We are developing financial policies that will go hand in hand with the debt model. That will be coming with some future meetings as we talk about the budget. Those will go hand in hand with this particular model. And then we are moving towards implementation of this model with direction from the board as we discussed today, if we'd like to move forward with the assumptions that are in the model. And then, of course, planning. Why are we here? What does this do for us? Knowing that the county is being presented with these needs, we're trying to figure out a way with your current resources, how fast and how soon can you meet the needs from the school system? So that's what it does. It provides a roadmap and evaluates what your debt affordability or capital affordability would be, and then measuring it as issues get done, as projects are done. It's able to take a tool back for yourselves and the public to see where you are and what you're investing in on the capital side. This is the graphic we've shown to you a couple different times, but this is a graphical representation of what the model actually does and operates. You'll see we have a number of different revenues that come into the model the county uses to pay for capital, including pay-go and debt service. So we have general fund monies, we have school sales tax monies that are designated for capital, education lottery monies that you get every year from the North Carolina Education Lottery, and then there could be some other sources as needed. And as those revenues come in, they're going to flow out of the CIF fund to pay debt service, to pay general government's pay-go for maintenance, for CIP programs that y'all are used to doing. I know that's being presented as far as the recommended projects that y'all do every year. We're looking at a 5-year CIP. It has the school's capital outlay, their technology outlay, and then pumps out what other additional revenue or capacity might you have to do other projects into the future. And again, this graphic shows we project the revenues, we project the expenses, and then what ends up happening. Projects tend to move slower. The interest rate assumptions we have in the model are conservative and prudent, so when we actually do it, they are lower in cost than we thought. And then that pumps out additional new capacity. So as things get done, we work with assumptions in the model. As we put real life in there, it tends to get better because we are looking at things in a prudent, conservative way into the future. So again, we've been working with your folks here, with the Amy and Heidi and some others, to get our hands around where you are now financially. And I think we're in a good place to be able to show you the model as it is today and a couple of scenarios possibly on what you can all do with the current resources you put towards capital. So with that, we're just going to dive right into the numbers. I'm going to project the model up. Again, we have a couple of different scenarios. The first being what can be done with the current revenues that we are assuming in the model. So let's see. See if I can share this for everybody. You all have some printed copies there for you with the scenarios we're looking at. Hopefully those on the Zoom and such can see this as well. What you have in front of you is what we consider the summary page. And this is really where we all live. It brings all the information from the other pages of the model up to the front so we can all see kind of what's going on. So as we start, you'll see the very beginning is revenues. What revenues do you currently have dedicated or will be dedicated to the model to help pay for the debt service and the pay-go? As I said before, those have been identified by general fund contributions, the education lottery that comes in, and then school sales tax numbers. Currently, in this coming up budget, you will appropriate approximately $3.3 million from the general fund to cover the other debt service and pay-go projects. About $300,000 in the education lottery is an average that comes in, and school sales tax for next fiscal year is approximately about $1.6 million. There's a couple of other funds that come in due to some of the already issued Q-scabs and Q-zabs that you have. These are federal subsidies that come in to help pay for some of those other things. Those are also coming in, but approximately right around 5.2 or $5.3 million in revenue is what you are currently dedicating for the debt service and PAYGO CIP projects. I will say, although you can't see the tab, we have reserved the PAYGO projects and spending that you currently have into the future. So nothing that we're talking about here will change the CIP PAYGO process that you're used to having every year for giving capital outlay and other CIP projects. All that's reserved in this model as well. So anything we're talking about is on top of what y'all are normally used to doing in your PAYGO CIP. So those recommended projects that you'll hear from the manager are currently in this model, the 5-year CIP, and we will continue to hone that as we get some additional numbers in. So what does all this mean? We have our revenues, and then of course you have a column of our expenditures. You already have currently issued debt service. Debt you've already issued that you're paying on in fiscal 22, that's approximately $1.8 million. PAYGO is approximately $3.2 million. So you'll see that most of the revenue that you're putting towards capital is spoken for between your debt service and your PAYGO. You'll notice though that the way debt is structured in North Carolina, you have falling debt service every year. So you'll see in that column next fiscal year in 2023, debt service goes to 1.6 million. By closing the loop of the revenue inside the model, we keep those monies on the capital side of the budget rather than it possibly falling into the operational sides. As debt service falls, it's going to stay within the CIF fund rather than being reprogrammed over into the operations sides. That'll help us project into the future what fund balances you might have and what your capacity for possibly issuing new school needs. In this particular model, we have designated without any new revenue assumptions, besides what's in the model, that you can issue approximately $20 million for the school needs, 20 of the 38 million that they've identified starting next year. You could do an issuance next year of $10 million, and then another $10 million in 2024. So that's what's your first assumption on here. One of the items you'll notice in the model is on the far right side, it's called the Capital Investment Fund in Balance. You'll see that that number drops to approximately 503,000. That's your trough. And that's what we use to help say what is affordable. That's your delta of conservativeness in the model to say how low can the fund go before it has to start coming back up again. So based on these current revenues that we've identified, and the freezing amount of $3.3 million coming from the general fund every year, we've identified approximately 20 million of the 38 can be done without any new revenue sources in this particular model. We do have a couple of other scenarios that we provided, but before we move forward with that, we wanted to see if you wanted to look at those particular models. They do get you more money, but they probably also require additional revenue into the model. So we could go through those. We have a $30 million version and a $38 million version that gets them the full ask. But that's, of course, at your pleasure. We have now delivered what we believe is your capacity within the current resources of the model.
And this is for just existing school needs, not new schools. It's just existing.
Correct. I believe they have what they call initial needs. The 38 million is their initial needs. So this is probably tackling mostly
additional. Okay.
Yeah, it's mostly classroom size type of items, maintenance and repairs, those types of things. The model is also interactive enough that you can throw some questions at me on the fly and say, well, what if we did 12 million or 8 million or whatever else? And we can see how that would affect the model and the affordability. It's interactive enough.
So just clarify here, we're funding it annually by how much? 5 million?
The revenues coming in are approximately $5.3 million in this model. A $3.3 million general fund contribution, a little more than 300,000 from the education lottery. That seems to be the average that y'all have gotten over the
Where
past.
is, I mean, I'm sorry to ask this question, but I don't see that.
I-
Is it lumped in with other funds?
It is lumped in
Okay.
on that, there's another tab of the model that describes each of these particular revenues.
So the total revenue includes lottery money?
Correct.
What else?
And school sales tax,
Okay.
and $3.3 million frozen amount from the general fund every year.
Okay. Thank you. I'm a little slow with numbers.
No,
Catch
we didn't provide all the pages, so you just have the summary up front.
Question. I was afforded the luxury of finding out we were given huge sums of money through the federal government due to this COVID outbreak last year, pandemic, ever how you want to label it. I don't find any numbers on anything I've found on our county budget so far. So where has all of these? 1,105,000 was first disbursement. 5,336,000 on the second disbursement. And supposedly 11 million on the third. If somebody provide me with some numbers, where this money has it came in, where did it go? What was it used for? When I come to your office.
Yes.
Friday,
We can talk about the CARES funding is what you're referring to
Yes,
that we've
ma'am.
gotten in the current fiscal year. All of that has come to the county and come to the board for approval prior probably to you being on the board. So I'm happy to sit down with you and go through exactly how those funds have been appropriated. In general, they were used to support the salaries of the employees who were allowed for those funds to be used, which were EMS, 911, those types of employees. But I will go through that with you. And if the board would like an update on where we are with the CARES funding, I'm happy to put that on an agenda to look at that as well.
This supposedly, according to my email, was directed to the schools.
The schools got some, the city of Roxborough got some, so I can ask them for an update of those funds too. Schools
Really appreciate
also
that.
received some.
I think we need to know the numbers and where all this money went
Sure,
before we conclude with our annual budget approval.
sure.
And I believe there's some capital money. A lot of what came from the CARES Act was mostly operational type of money that came in to support salaries and increased costs due to having to provide masks or cleanings and this type of thing. There is some capital money in the stimulus act that was just passed that will be coming to the county that might be able to be used for a number of these projects. Unfortunately, like many things that come out of the federal government, that language is written about as clear as mud. So we're trying to, everyone, including the League of Municipalities, League of County Commissioners here in North Carolina, there's been many phone calls with finance directors and such. They're still trying to figure out exactly how you can use that money. But there will be some capital money that could go into this model that could possibly help support some other school capital as well. But just don't know the answers to a lot of those questions yet.
18 million is a whole lot of money, and I think the citizens as well as us commissioners want to know where we're sending our monies to. Are they being appropriate? According to what I've got, is for the public schools. And I'd be glad to share this email with you.
Most definitely.
Anybody in here?
So Andrew, in the scenario that you're running with a $10 million issuance, can you talk to us about the revenue to support that debt service in terms of a tax increase or what would need to come from the general fund to pay the debt service on that?
Gotcha. So the revenues we've identified are the ones that are already somewhat currently in your budget. So these would be monies that would have to be used in this next fiscal year to cover the bills. And as we somewhat said, as debt service falls and that doesn't get programmed back into the operational budget, you'll see that's why the fund balance on your first page starts to rise a bit before you start using monies to cover where your annual resources aren't enough to pay your annual expenditures. You'll see in the very far right column, in this particular model, we have some what's called red numbers and capital fund used. Those are the years where your revenues were not sufficient to meet your expenditures, but you're able to use your fund balance to hedge off any spikes on your budget to have to increase revenue in that particular year to pay. So as part of the affordability, we look and say, we look at a number of different things. How far does fund balance? How low can it go? That's part of the policy that we'll be bringing back to the board. Before that, as we call that, that's the fund balance coverage number. And that's when you start saying, no, we can't afford any more capital expending. This particular model, there could be additional revenues found even through budget processes. Many of our clients use sometimes one-time funds that come from the federal government, land sales, other types of revenue sources that somewhat come in and out into the model to help offset any detriment that you might have in it. Right now, the way we run the model and the assumptions of a frozen, every year you would appropriate the same $3.3 million a year into the fund, and then the lottery money and sales tax also goes in that. Sales tax comes in, it is what it is, right, every year, and we have just a 1% growth on the sales tax in the model currently to help keep us in a prudent and conservative assumption on that. So your sources of revenue are general fund, as you're doing now, lottery monies, and the school sales tax.
So we've used two different numbers, 10 million and 20, didn't we?
Two different scenarios.
Yeah, so this one shows a total of 20 million in funding.
Okay.
It would take two issuances of $10 million each. So they would get $10 million in this particular assumption sometime next fiscal year, and then another 10 million in fiscal 24.
So we can handle that without the tax increase.
For no additional revenue needed, yes, sir.
Okay.
We have scenarios that show 30 million. That would show how much revenue you might need to support 30 million.
Do you
Now,
have a quick number at 30 million?
we do. So at 30 million, that's your second
page.
sheet you have there. At 30 million, it's approximately 1 penny. And we put things in penny equivalences because that's usually a very easy number for everyone to get their head around. But at no point are we necessarily advocating for ad valorem tax increases. It would just mean that 490,000, that's about 1 penny, starting next fiscal year, would need to be found to put into this model every year to support 30 million. So they would get 10 million in 22, 10 million in 24, and 2 years later, 10 million in 26. So they would get 30 million in total funding, but it would take us till 2026 to issue that last amount for them to be able to go through and spend. And as I said, that could be found through budget savings, moving things around, all those types of things. As I said, not necessarily advocating for an ad valorem tax increase. The 38 million, I have a quick back of the envelope for that as well. That's your third sheet. That's approximately 1.7 pennies. So 1.7 pennies is about $833,000 a year. That could be added to the model. That would support, again, 10 million in 22, 10 million in 24, 10 million in 26, and then 8 million 2 years later in 2028. So we would fully fund the 38 million they're asking for through 2028. Sorry,
So we have a Chevy and a Cadillac to choose from.
Exactly. And so, as we said, the interactive of the model, you know, we could go through what would it cost to do it all at one time? What if we wanted to rip the Band-Aid off, and how much would that cost? That's the beauty of the model, is it gives you all what-if scenarios. You can ask as many questions as needed. What does it look like if we do this? What if we did the schools now and something else different? If we moved it up, how much might that cost us? And that really arms you with the tools to be able to look Can we do that through budget savings? Do we do that through other ways? And how important are those projects to us? Because this is basically you're creating, in essence, your priorities of capital funding. And I just want to remind us, this all still includes the normal CIP pay-go process y'all do annually. We're still continuing to do those projects for approximately $3 million a year. So it's not robbing Peter to pay Paul in a necessarily sense. You're getting the school needs and continuing your normal CIP pay-go process and tech and capital outlay that you do annually. It does not take away any of that flexibility.
So the capital improvement fund comes out of the annual resources, and that's figured into that? Is that what you're saying?
It is. There would be.
Like the first line, the 3.5 million is part of the 5.3 total annual resources. That's the capital improvement fund.
Correct.
3 million, so that leaves the other 2, whatever million for spending, for actual spending.
Yes, and
Okay.
so you'll see you have to use fund balance. Sometimes we are reserving fund balance in the future because the model shows we'll have to use it. And that's how we get to part of the affordability. How is the revenue supporting as compared to any fund balances? And you'll have some fund balances naturally created right now. There's some money in the debt service fund. There's money at the lottery held by the state. And I think there's some funds in other places. So we're starting with a little bit of fund balance right now.
So this model then is just for our existing schools the way they are. That's not saying if we close a school or consolidate a school, that could change these models totally. Do we have scenarios about that?
We do not.
Okay.
All we have been given at this point are the identified needs that that the schools got from a consultant, an engineer, who came in to assess class size needs, ADA requirements, major maintenance improvements. It's those sort of projects.
Mm-hmm.
But you raise a good point that the model will allow us to introduce other projects as we go. And one big one on our radar screen, but not yet finalized, is a project that PCC has been asking for, an advanced manufacturing technology center. They're going to come speak to the board about that project in May. And we've had a placeholder sort of moving target of right now in the CIP, they had asked for 25 million. That project is changing. They're seeking other funding sources, but I do expect at some point we'll need to introduce some PCC needs into the debt service model because they're so large. We couldn't, afford a project of that magnitude without putting it into the debt model.
Right. So part of our contract with you then is that if we need to change these models based on whatever our changing dynamics and our
Yeah.
scenarios, you can plug these in and model for us and bring it back to us. If we do have a change in what we're currently doing, we
That's right.
shift doing. Okay.
Yep. We're currently at version 3 for you all, and just
How many versions do we get?
as many as you
want to pay
need.
for, okay.
I was getting ready to joke that we've been working with some of our clients for a little over a decade now who started some of this, and I laugh because we're about 300 models in their folder at this point. We're at version 62A or 62B. So yes,
Okay.
we run as many of them as we need to, and that's part of what this tool is able to do for you. If we do this, how does that affect what we're able to do in the future? So if we need to move one project up as a priority and move another project down, we can show how all that flows. When can we do the next project if we do maybe this project first? And so that's the real power it gives you.
Thank you.
So Andrew, the what if scenario, I think there's some of the buzzwords around Raleigh and the legislature has to do with school bonds.
Yes.
So if scenario, Person County was to get 10 million, whatever, I don't know if there was a projected number.
Mm-hmm.
So then you could inject that into this.
Exactly. As we were saying before, with any federal stimulus money that might come in, any monies from the state, if they do a school bond deal, we can incorporate that all into the model. And that, of course, would be a benefit to the model as it would come in. And I said before, you know, a lot of times one-time monies and land sales and this, that, and the other, you can also program into the model, and that would shave off what you may or may not have to do, or mean you can do more faster. And so, yes, every time there's a change to revenues or expenditures, we will rerun the model and show you that what-if scenario.
This current model is essentially pay-go. We aren't doing bonds.
Besides the 2 school issuances we have issued. Otherwise, it continues your normal CIP pay-go program as you always have done.
Right, but the 10 million would be a
It
financing.
would be a financing, yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions about the model?
Further questions, Mr. Carter?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you
Andrew.
very much. Thank you for having us.
Very much. And do you have any comments?
No. I think we just really, our purpose this morning, Dan, to be here is just to introduce you to the concept of the debt model that they have now completed, and showing you the flexibility we have to, you know, propose these large projects, and it allows you to know whether it's affordable without, you know, or up to what point is it affordable without a tax increase. It just really gives you a lot of flexibility to make those decisions.
Right, okay, thank you. Didn't want to leave you out. Your name is on the agenda. Okay. Next item on the agenda is Person County Fire District map update by Fire Marshal Duncan.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. And Ms. Gentry and Mr. Palmer, finally glad to meet you in person. This morning, I'm here to ask for your consideration of approval for a new fire district map. And to give you a little background of why we're asking this is back last year in 2020, the original Woodsdale district was decertified. And we had to find ways to cover those citizens. And we have worked on that for quite a while now and brought us to here. We've worked with the departments that bordered that so that the citizens would have coverage until we could come up with a better scenario. We started with Woodsdale trying to recertify, and I worked with them directly, and they were moving along pretty good, but it hit a few bumps in the road. It made it not impossible, but made it very hard for them to recertify through the state. In the meantime, Triple Springs Fire Department was gracious enough to offer one solution to that problem, was to acquire some of the Woodsdale district. And with the county manager and assistant county manager's help, we reached out to Seppo District and Roxborough Rural District to adjust those lines to get as many people from a class 10 back to a lower rating, whatever rating that department could have. In doing this, it caused a redraw of the Woodsdale district map, showing the increases of the other districts into that area. Finally, with the help of the GIS department, which is now my new superstar in this whole mix, without their help, I couldn't have done any of this. But we looked at the overall lines for every district to make sure we were doing what we could for the citizens, and there were some discrepancies. Mostly with every district there was. And I think it just had to do with original boundary maps drawn when the districts were created, a different map that may have been approved later on with ISO districts because the state classified it either a 5 or 6 mile boundary. What we did, with mostly what Sally did, was to adjust those lines so that the response district and the ISO district mirrored one another. They will be the same. I have spoken with the Office of State Fire Marshal, and that's what they recommended. They are waiting for your consideration on this, and if so, they will take the new map and approve it as the official map for Person County. What this helped us do was we had parcels. I really couldn't believe it, but we did have several parcels that district lines, you may have a parcel that you were in 3 different fire districts. There were several on there like that, and we wanted to try to eliminate those. So with this new map, if you own a parcel in Person County, you will be totally in one district or the other. There's no parts anymore, no lines running across parcels. Also, this would help, as I said, we tried to adjust the lines to get as many people in the lowest ISO rating we could. The Fire Chiefs Association was given this map at 2 different occasions for their consideration and approval. On the first meeting, they did find a couple of problems with it, which we were easily able to change. At the second meeting, there was total approval of the map. In the future, if there is ever a change in districts, these new lines and boundaries would help make it a lot easier to change if there ever was a need to. So today I'm asking for your consideration and approval of the map. And the second part of this item, Assistant County Manager, Ms. Kathy, has a presentation for you. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to entertain those.
Mr. Duncan, I know we have some areas that are beyond 6 miles, which are ISO 10 areas. So the only way we could eliminate those would be if one of these districts were to have a satellite facility or fire department put up, then depending on where it was located, that would be about the only way you can eliminate the ISO 10 areas. Would that be correct?
Very much so. But I will add, thanks to Chief Fletcher, I believe, back in the room here from Timberlake. He had personally worked with OSFM on a hybrid program that they were using. With his district, he had a couple of parcels or areas that were 10s from the station. And he was able to work with OSFM and the bordering departments to respond to that district, and OSFM was granting them the lower ISO rating for that. So he's cleared up, I think, both areas in his county. We are going to try to work with other districts in that same program, but if it's too much distance for one department or the other, it would take a satellite station, as you said, to repair that.
So did we get a special variance or accommodation for over the 5 or 6 miles then for those?
The way it's set up,
the state gave us a little bit more room?
What they did is the determination for your score or your ISO rating is determined from the fire station, 5 road miles in every direction. They will get the lowest rating. They also went above that and went from 5 to 6 miles and gave everybody the 9S rating. So that gave more citizens at least a 9 rating instead of a 10. And so it did help with their insurance rates. Anything, no matter what district in North Carolina you're in, if you're in that 5 to 6 miles, you will have a 9. And anything outside the 6, you will have a 10. And we're trying our best to eliminate all the 10s that we can, either by satellite station or this hybrid program that they're instituting now.
Question, when you speak a second ago about bordering departments, are
Yes, sir.
they bordering within Person County or beyond?
Beyond Person County.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I'll take that back. As with Timberlake's department, one was in Durham County,
Okay, all right.
and Roxborough is the second one. There will be automatic aid to a certain property that they could not reach within 6 miles. Roxborough could. And so with that agreement submitted, they will be able to assume that lower ISO rating in that area. Oh, I'm sorry.
So I got a question, a couple of them. If I live beside the fire department, what's my rating?
Whatever their rating is,
If I live a mile away?
whatever their rating is. If, I'm saying. if
What I'm
they're-
asking is it a 9 across the board as long as you're within the 5-mile radius?
All of our districts right now are at the minimum of a 9. So if you live in any district in Person County, you have at least a 9. Some others, such as Moore, Timberlake, have lowered their 5-mile limit to a 4, class 4, which is great. It helps homeowners and commercial when you go that low. We have 3 departments scheduled in July to go through their rating, and 1 more following that 6 months from there. The only reason for the 6-month delay was because of health issues and COVID and things like that. So they asked for temporary suspension until, not suspension, but temporary delay so that they could get their things straight. So no matter where you live, you at least have a 9. If you live, such as in Timberlake District, if you live within 5 miles, 5 road miles of the station, you would have a 4. But if you live above 5 miles up to 6, you'll always be a 9, no matter. Anywhere in the state is like that.
It's not your physical distance to the firehouse, it's the fire district's distance in general. It's not your proximity. It's not a particular property's proximity that affects their rating. It's the rating of the fire department. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, I think.
The fire department itself has a rating of the miles, and it affects anybody in that, whether they live next door or 5
That
miles
is
away.
correct.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Anywhere in that 5-mile district, you'll have the lowest rating that department has.
But it's individual to each department, and what you're saying, we've got some departments that are coming up for review, and they're hoping to lower those ISO, which lowers insurance rates.
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
The Hurdle Mills, Roxborough, and Allensville districts are up for their inspections in July. Suffolk will be 6 months after that date. So hopefully by the end of this year, all the Triple Springs will have lowered their rate, and they would probably too, had not it been for the acquiring of hopefully a new station and territory and things. Because if they acquire the Woodsdale station, that requires an inspection itself just to make sure it's rated a 9.
So if we had a satellite here, if you were saying if we had a satellite, then would that be the same, or would that fall under the home station? If we had a satellite
The
station.
satellite, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry, I mean, the satellite would be again, it reduces the distance, as we were talking about, the fire station within a 5-mile radius. Well, if you have a satellite station
Right.
that is certified, then it will be from that
And
station.
it
to
falls
5
under
miles.
that, or the mother station, the mothership, right?
Right, but it gives you,
Okay.
it gives you more coverage
That's a good idea.
of the county, but you've got to man those, and you got to have the volunteers that can support
Yeah,
that station. So, but yeah, that could happen.
thank you.
Such as Mariah's district, just speaking of them, has a main and substation, and it's 5 miles from either of those stations. Where you live, you would get there, baby.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay.
What is to happen to the 2 Woodsdale stations?
I'm sorry.
What is to happen to the 2 Woodsdale stations?
What is going to happen?
Yes.
With your approval of this map and their board of directors' approval of your approval, if you approve the new territory and the increased funding that they would acquire for the additional district, if they vote for that, they would have I guess you would say the main station, the Triple Spring station, and they are subject to acquire the Boston Road station. And along with that, several vehicles, equipment, turnout gear, just about everything. The equipment and that is not in the MOU and the other station on Shiloh Road will still remain under the direction of the board that's in place right now. And according to their bylaws, those properties and equipment will be sold. They will take the money to clear any debt. And when they are finally debt-free, they are planning to dissolve totally that board. And it will be just the Triple Springs district then.
I think they have 2 fire trucks there for sale. Is that correct, if I'm not
Yes, sir.
mistaken?
2
They got
trucks.
2
and
trucks are for sale.
The satellite station from Shiloh Road.
So that's up for sale currently,
It is currently for
all the
sale.
properties,
Sir,
every bit of it, whole property, building, structure, fire,
the whole building and
trucks and
parcel
everything.
and the 2 trucks, as Mr. Sims mentioned, that are not under the MOU between the 2 boards will be sold. And any equipment that's not in the MOU, it may be some accessory stuff that they can get rid of, but it will be sold to satisfy debt.
Okay, thank you. I've had a citizen ask me about it. He had heard through the grapevine that it was for sale.
It
We
is?
now have it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sad to hear, but it is what it is.
I don't understand. And I will have to, congratulate the board that they have. They worked hard, and especially the president worked really hard to keep that district in hold. It just, sometimes things are hard to overcome. And in this case, it was, and with the help of the other districts, being able to assume some of that territory really helped out, because a lot of citizens would have went to attend, even though you might have had districts covering that territory, it was well beyond their 6 miles, and those residents would have went to attend. So this way, it was the best case scenario we could have hoped for, and I couldn't have done it without Heidi and Catherine, and especially my superstar back there, Sally Bowman.
Would we be able to get a map of with the new fire districts, but also encoded to what their ISO ratings are?
Yes, we can provide that, yes, sir. And you want what's current?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I don't know exactly how this board will feel about this, but I appreciate your efforts on that and those of Mr. Sims as well as taking his assignment very seriously, working with you folks. But to me, from a citizen's standpoint, what you're doing, I think is commendable. But again, as a citizen, I think probably there are two things that are very important. Number one is response time. And we have an emergency. We want to know how soon someone can get to us.
That's correct.
And the other thing would, of course, be the ISO rating. That's what we have been aiming for over the past couple of 3 years in particular, to improve the ISO ratings, which impacts what they get for their money.
Yes, sir.
So I think it's extremely important. So those two things stand out to me. I don't know about other commissioners, but we do thank you for your efforts and continued placing of citizens' well-being at the forefront of what you're doing. Thank you.
And Mr. Powell, you've been at a couple of those meetings, so thank you for your help. And along with Mr. Sims, I think he's been at everything. And we're working hard. It's a long road, but we're steadily on top of it and trying to improve it every day.
Thank you.
If no more questions, I'll turn it over to Miss Kathy for her part of the agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. The second part of this item is to allocate some additional funding to the Triple Springs District as well as the Roxborough District in response to realigning the districts if this map is approved. So Triple Springs, as Keith explained, would be assuming an additional satellite station to add to their main station, as well as the majority of the territory within the current Woodsdale district. So staff recommends an additional $22,000 in this current fiscal year. Currently, there is $45,769 remaining in the unallocated line item within the fire district tax. So that money is available to cover this $22,000 from the fire district tax. We also recommend allocating an additional $10,000 to the Roxborough Fire Department for assuming some of Woodsdale's district with these lines that are being redrawn. Our volunteers' contracts are up for renewal July 1st, so we are taking a close look at the fire district tax and the revenue that will be generated in the new fiscal year. We have a formula that we're using to calculate that, so we'll be looking at all of that funding closely for the next fiscal year. And in the process of doing that, we considered the current realignment and what that would possibly lead to in terms of additional funding for this year. We kind of looked at that March 1st date when Woodsdale was officially decertified to tie that to the allowing additional funding for this last 4 months of this fiscal year from this available funds in the fire district tax. So do y'all have any questions about the funding recommendation? 2,000 is in the fire tax fund. What about the additional 10? Is that in there as
It is
well?
also in the
Okay.
fire district tax fund because the city of Roxborough in the city limits pays their property taxes go to fund the fire department. We make a general fund contribution as well. There are residents in the rural district that Roxborough serves that are paying the fire district tax. So this is taking some of those funds to go to Roxborough this year.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommended new funding for the Triple Springs and for the city of Roxborough.
We have a motion. Any further discussion on this one? Okay, all in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
And approval of the map as well. That was the second part of this agenda item. Do we have an approval?
I make a motion to accept the map, the approval of the map as well.
A motion to accept the maps as presented. All further discussion, I'm sorry. All in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries.
Thank
very
you.
much. Item number 4 on the agenda is broadband update from Lumen or CenturyLink. Kathy again.
Yes, so at the March 4th budget retreat, you requested that presentation be made by CenturyLink on their current services provided within Person County and any plans for the future. We are happy that Derek Kelly, who is the Government Affairs Director for Lumen, which is also CenturyLink, has agreed to join us remotely today, and he will be presenting information for you all as far as in response to your request, and then he'll be available to answer any questions that you may have following his presentation. So he is on Zoom, and I think we'll be able to turn it over to him now.
Hey, good morning. This is Derek with CenturyLink. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I appreciate the introduction. Like she mentioned, our company name is Lumen. We announced that a couple months ago. That is sort of our corporate name across all of our brands and across the globe, but we still operate under the CenturyLink brand when it comes to some of our local markets, primarily where we have residential areas like in Person County. So you'll still see our vans and people wearing shirts in restaurants and stuff like that, as we still operate under the CenturyLink brand. But if you see my email address, you'll see Lumen, and a lot of our slides and stuff have gotten rebranded to Lumen. So I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak. I figured I would cover on a couple things today and talk about just sort of how I see broadband in the state of the county. I want to talk quickly about the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, which was recently announced by the FCC. Talk about the state's great grant program and just how we look at that as we're looking at counties to pursue, and talk about some of the challenges we face looking at Person County. And I'm not going to have one slide for each one of these topics. I'll sort of bounce around and try to cover all of them as I'm going through. Feel free to interrupt me if you have questions as we're going through, and I show you some maps of the county. So the first one is, this is the FCC's current map. And for those not familiar with how the FCC and how providers currently do mapping, is we have to provide our coverage areas to the FCC twice a year at a census block level. So if there's a single house that we serve in a census block, that census block gets shown as serve, and there's some different speed tiers that we report to the FCC. We all know that method is not 100% accurate, but directionally, comparing it to neighboring counties and across the country, you would think they're at least directionally correct. We've been waiting for the next generation of maps to come out for a little while now. We've participated in a number of trials with the FCC and some of the companies trying to figure out the framework for the next round of maps. And the FCC has been working on that framework for a couple years now, but just recently in one of the COVID relief bills with Congress, they actually finally appropriated the funds necessary for them to do that. So about a month ago or so, the FCC released the next order on just how this process is going to play out. It's probably going to take about 12 to 18 months for them to get all their systems up, collect all the data from providers, and actually show us what the next generation of maps are. But they're promising, and we've seen just from the trials we've participated in that the next round of maps will be far more accurate because they'll be more location based. But the reason I always talk about it, why we've reported on census block level for so long, is if you've ever driven in a rural road in North Carolina, and I live down in Sampson County and I've traveled all across the state, a lot of times you'll be following your GPS and it'll say your destination's in 1 mile. And then about 2 seconds later, you end up flying past the building. And that's because of geocoding issues. Just all the different mapping systems, whether it's Garmin, Google Earth, Waze, Apple Maps, whichever, we know approximate location of buildings and location, but that actually trying to plot them on a map can be challenging, especially when you get into all of our NC highways and state routes and all those things. Sometimes plotting them is the difficult thing. So this is the map that we have to work on from now. So what this is showing, from the tan areas are basically showing that all the providers that have reported have basically said they don't serve a single home in that census block with at least 25 megs down and 3 megs up. And then as you go into the sort of light green areas, means there's one provider, and then you get into the 2 shades of darker blue, get to where there's 2, 3, and 4 or more providers. So when you look at Person County just at a glance, it looks pretty well served. Now, it's not to say that every one of these homes in every one of these census blocks has service, but by and large, the county is pretty well covered, especially if you're looking at some of the neighboring counties and just comparing it. So when we look at this view, this is all companies, all technologies. So I started breaking it down by, who are your traditional wireline companies. So this would be us and the cable companies, whether it's our DSL product, if we have fiber to the home in some areas, or cable coverage, this is where we have service. So for the counties that don't have a fixed wireless presence, as we're looking at things like the GREAT grant, we usually look at a map like this, or sometimes we turn off our layers of DSL and fiber and just look at where the cable company is and go, okay, we know where our stuff is down household by household, but trying to figure out exactly where our competitors start and stop in some of these areas that show served can be a challenge, but that's generally how we start looking for opportunities when it comes to the GREAT grant. So we're now heading into the 4th round of GREAT grants. For the first round, it was limited to Tier 1 counties. I forgot to quickly look before I started talking. Person County is a Tier 2 county, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So back in that very first round in 2019, Person County was not eligible. When we got into the 2 rounds last year, Person County became eligible. And what we basically do is we're in 67 of the 100 counties in North Carolina. We basically stack rank them based on what county tier they are. So for that next round, Tier 3 counties weren't eligible. So we removed those and looked, okay, here's what we have left. And then we'd look at the different scoring requirements of the GREAT grant. So one of them, it goes off the number of unserved homes in the county, which we all use the FCC data, which, again, you're just comparing county to county, not saying this is the total number of unserved homes. And based on the number of those homes, you get a certain number of points. And then the next question is, what % of those are you going to serve? And then that gives you the next set of points. We try to weigh those 2 questions against each other. To give you an example, if you pull up a county and it says there's 100 unserved homes, you're going to score low on that question. But the next question is, can you serve at least 30% of them? So you only need a project of 30 homes to get the max points for that one. Whereas I remember a couple years ago, we were looking at Duplin County and put in an application. It showed that there was 4,000 unserved homes in the county. So you got maximum points for that question, but it also meant you had to put together a big project of, at least 12 or 1,300 homes to get max points in the other one. So it's a balancing act. And then what we do is I have a team of about 5 network planners that go and dig in and develop projects along with myself. And we start looking up, okay, based on where they serve, I tried to pick up, here's the top one for you to go and look at and basically give them an order of priority on where to start looking at. And so, one of the things that we have sort of stayed away from Person County is because of this map. So I basically turned off all the layers except for fixed wireless. So this basically shows, the fiber and fixed wireless project that you guys teamed up with NC Wireless a couple years ago. And this is now how they're reporting to the FCC as their coverage. So we know the center part of the county is well covered with us and cable in the Roxborough area. So when we start looking out at the rural parts of the county, you look at this map and go, wow, there's just not a lot of opportunity there. So it's not to say that their wireless system covers every one of the homes in each one of these census blocks, but they're claiming to cover at least one home in there. And when we can put in a great grant to go into any of these served areas, but we have to do our due diligence to figure out where our where our competitors are and where they're not. When we're looking at a cable competitor like a Spectrum, we do that a number of ways. One, we look at this data and figure out, here's the big areas where they say they're not, and then we start branching out from there by either looking at their website and searching for some random addresses. We have technicians drive around the area and try to figure out where we see their facilities and where, which roads we don't see their facilities. That's a little bit more of a challenge when it comes to fixed wireless, because, we know the 4 towers that you guys partnered on, but every fixed wireless technologies are different with how far they reach. Some are able to propagate through trees better than other technologies. So trying to really figure out where they are and where they're not has been a real challenge for us. And that's why, by and large, the counties that are well covered by fixed wireless, we've stayed away from when it comes to the great grant for the most part, unless we're able to get some help from the county and say, we know they're not down in this area. Can you come and look at it? And we're happy to look at those areas. So I'm going to jump over to the FCC's RDOF program. So RDOF stands for Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. Previously, the program was called the Connect America Fund. And when it was the Connect America Fund, the FCC basically came to companies like CenturyLink, and it was on a state-by-state basis. And they came to us and said, okay, in North Carolina, we think there are 75,000 homes that are eligible for the Connect America Fund in your service area. We'll give you X amount of dollars if you can serve 36,000 of them. And so they gave us enough money to cover about 40% of the homes that they deemed as eligible. And if we accepted the money, we got to pick and choose which ones were the best 40% for us to go to. So for the 5 or so years of that program, you could have gone and looked at the map and said, okay, I'm in an eligible area, but that doesn't necessarily mean you would get coverage, because they just didn't give us the funding to serve all of them. As this program kicked off, instead of them coming directly to the incumbent telephone providers, they basically opened it up for all broadband providers as long as they could meet certain criteria, and it was a reverse auction style. So what they did is they took blocks of census or groups of census blocks, and they came up with what they called the reserve price for it, and say this was 100% bidding. And when the auction opened up, providers could say, okay, I'm willing to come in at 100%. And if there was more than one provider, they would go down to the next level, and they would go down in, I think, 5% increments until there was basically just one provider standing in the auction, and they were awarded the funds. So in Person County, CenturyLink did not receive any RDOF funds. Spectrum was the largest winner in the county. So where you see the bright red areas, that is where Spectrum won the auction. And if you were to compare this map to some of the previous maps, you would notice they won some funds in some areas where now NC Wireless is claiming to serve. And I think that was due to a matter of timing, just when NC Wireless claimed to be in those areas with their reporting to the FCC versus when the FCC put out the maps of what areas were eligible. So there is a little bit of overlap, but when you see some of those census blocks that were showing white, they're now being covered by the red areas that are in the RDOF program. And for looking forward, when it comes to the GREAT grant, we believe those areas will be off limits for future GREAT grants. Now, the blue area were won by SpaceX. So this is Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, his startup company that he formed that's basically using low Earth orbit satellites. So instead of the satellites being thousands of miles up in the air, now they're 80 or 90% closer to the Earth. And instead of there only being 1 or 2 over the U.S., there's going to be hundreds or thousands of these across the globe. And so I've seen some preliminary speed results just posted online. It appears that customers are, able to get somewhere between 50 and 100 meg with much lower latency, or the speed that it takes to send requests back and forth to those satellites. But for the purpose of the GREAT grant, those areas would not be marked off as ineligible, or they would be eligible if a provider was going to serve into those areas, as long as there wasn't another provider there. So if we sort of combine all these maps and say, okay, if we looked at the very first map, which were the areas that are showing no provider served, and then take off the areas that are being covered by the RDOF program, which for Spectrum that should be marked as ineligible, you're left with this map. And I apologize if it's not showing up really well, but there's very few green areas. So there's one over here on the side. You have a couple clusters down in here. You have one small one here, 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 then a cluster up here. And I've not scanned in to actually see, you know, sometimes you look at these maps and you scan in, you go, there's actually not even a house there. It's just, you know, farmland or forest land or something like that, or sometimes water. But by and large, there's not a whole lot of unserved areas, what I would consider the low hanging fruit of, you know, where do we start from and then try to branch out. So when we're doing a fiber project, there's definitely some economies of scale. You know, if we have to go spend tens of thousands of dollars to place the equipment and electronics that actually serves the fiber to the home area, you want to be able to spread that out over, you know, at least up in the hundreds. It doesn't have to be, you know, 1,000, but, you know, if that piece of equipment is serving, you know, 100, 200, 300 homes versus you go and place if you had to go and just serve the census block here and say there's 30 homes, being able to spread that cost out over 30 homes is going to be a challenge, and it's going to make your grant where it's just not viable because your cost for every home you have to pass is going to be extremely high. And so that's one of the things that I see counties helping with and playing a part is, you know, you get to hear from your constituents every day. Some of them make their way to me via some of our internal groups, but unless a county comes to us, when you're looking at a map like this and says, hey, you know, we know that NC Wireless, we know their towers, you know, it may be here, but it's actually a much bigger area just because the amount of trees, we know their signal's not getting down here. And if the county were to call out areas like that, you know, that is something we can go and explore. The next round of GREAT grants, the broadband office has not detailed when they're expecting to kick off that program, but we're anticipating it could be as soon as about 60 days. So we're almost past the point of being able to add more counties to explore. So if you were to come to me today, I could look at it and see if it's something we can work with. But if it ends up, you know, you come to me a month from now, we're really going to be looking at the next round of GREAT grants. And I don't know if, excuse me, if they'll end up doing 2 rounds this year. That was the model they did last year. So they had a sort of their regular round, and then they came back in with an additional $30 million and had a supplementary round. We're not sure if they're going to, you know, follow suit with that model this year, or if it's just going to go back to doing 1 round per year. So I've rattled off a lot of information and stuff. I'll just pause and see if anyone has any questions.
How is this point system decided with the FCC? I think you mentioned that they award so many points based on the tier level of the county. Did I understand that correctly?
So that's not with the FCC. That's with the state broadband grant program. For the GREAT grant, they have a scoring system that is set up, and there's probably about 8 different scorings that you get. So based on the county tier, you don't get points. That just tells you whether or not you're eligible. So for the first round, they just said, we're going to take the tier 1 counties. Those are the only ones that you can apply in. They since opened it up to tier 2. And then in this special round they did last year, they ended up opening it up to rural census tracts in tier 3 counties that had a total employment less than like 500,000 people. So it ruled out some of the Wake and Mecklenburgs, but it opened up to about 95 counties. With this next round, we don't know if we're going to just go back to the 80 tier 1 and tier 2s, or if they'll end up doing what they did last year, which opened it up to about 95 counties.
Okay, thank you. And that's the grants, that's federal, the federal.
No, at the state.
The state, okay.
All right.
Are these maps accessible for us?
So these last two where it looks like a Google Earth, those are screenshots of some of my internal systems with just Google Earth. But for these other ones like this, you can search for just on Google FCC broadband map. And when you go there, there's an area view. And if you click on area, you can search for just person county. Or the first map that usually comes up, it'll say location, and you can search for a specific address, and it'll scroll down where you can see that census block, and it tells you which providers are claiming to have what service. Up at the top, there's a little cogwheel, and you can toggle between different technologies, and that's how I got this view here, is by just clicking off DSL and fiber and cable and satellite, and I'm just looking at fixed wireless.
Thank you.
And there's also this map here. While this is my internal system, the FCC also has a map for the RDOF program. So if you search for FCC RDOF map, it should take you where you can see this data. It'll just look like the previous screens a little bit. But it's not as easy to take screenshots off of that map I found, which is why I ended up using this one so I could show the different colors.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, anyone? I'd like to maybe make one and an observation, certainly from my perspective, been in Person County all my life. CenturyLink and its predecessors have been an important part of the county's growth, and we certainly look forward to more in the future because it's critical to economic development. But based on feedback that I get from citizens, I don't know that they would particularly agree with your statement that the county is pretty well covered. I don't know that that's from the citizenry standpoint. That's an accurate statement. I probably get more complaints from CenturyLink than any one other provider. But so going forward, I would like to know a little more about what your plans really are, down to the very basics. In working with Person County IT, the investment we made in fiber towers and other equipment in the county. Again, I equate it almost to the same as the fire district maps. Are you getting service or not? And if not, then what do we plan to do about it? And how quickly? I know you mentioned an 18-month period, but so again, those are my thoughts. Again, I appreciate what you're doing, but share freely with you what I'm hearing.
I appreciate the feedback, and I'll go back to this map and just touch on it really quick. So this is looking at where us and Charter have service of at least 25 megs down and 3 megs up. If I were to switch it to just show DSL at 10 megs down and 1 meg up, you would see a lot of these areas up around the lakes end up being colored in with green. So it means we have probably 10 meg or maybe 15 meg. And if you rewind pre-COVID, you know, if we were having this discussion, I would have said, you know, when it comes to the homework gap is a term that's been coined over the years, you know, the ability for people to complete their homework at home, I would have said that 10 megs closed the homework gap, but it may not have closed the entertainment gap. You know, you can go and research projects. You can stream a single Netflix movie or YouTube video if you're trying to do something. But the ability to do, you know, lots of gaming or doing video teleconference like this, and everything else that has been brought on by COVID. You know, my daughter's in 4th grade having to do Google Meet videos with her teachers all the time. Really, to do that, you need about a 2 to 3 meg upload. And so while 10.1 may have been able to close the homework gap pre-COVID, really when it comes to the world that we're living in now, 10.1 is just not cutting it. And that's really why the FCC and all these programs have moved the definition, is just because of the difference between 10.1 and 25.3. You know, if you have a 10.1 connection, you may be able to have one student limping by and doing something video related. But if there's more than one student in the house, or mom or dad are also trying to do, Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever, a 10-1 connection is just not going to cut it. And so a lot of those areas that you see are tan are actually served by homes that may be able to get 10 or 15 meg. And that may be where part of it is you're hearing some of those complaints. Now, the thing I would say is, all those areas appear to be covered by NC Wireless. If this is not their true coverage map and they don't touch nearly as wide of an area as this, that would be questions for them on are they reporting accurately when it comes to their coverage? And then you touched on the county's, fiber and tower projects. Personally, we don't have any use for those fibers at the time being. We have fiber throughout the community, and we like to stay on our own network. That way, if something happens and one of those fibers are cut, we have the crews and, we're responsible for our own destiny of getting our customers back in service. And access to the towers, right now we're not doing any fixed wireless in North Carolina. It's not to say that we may not go into it with some point in time, but right now we're not looking at any fixed wireless solutions.
So basically your maps show that the county is covered. It's just not at a high speed type. We're covered by a lot of the minimum stuff, but in today's world, we don't have access to be able to function at high speed. Say, would you get in an urban area? But from the maps, from your standpoint, we're covered. Just basically, just minimally covered with service.
Right. Up into the last round of great grants, the state had been focusing on areas that were less than 10-1. During this last round, they opened it up to areas that are less than 25-3, but you still had to have at least 90% of your project focus on areas that are without 10-1. There's still, lots of homes throughout the state that have access to 0 meg today. And that's where the state wanted to make sure we were still focusing on those areas that are hurting the most. I'm not sure what technology and what speeds NC Wireless offers. They're saying they have at least 25-3 in all these census blocks. There's some fixed wireless companies out there with 50 and 100 meg packages. I'm not as familiar with them and what technology they're using to say, these areas have access to exactly 25-3 or if it's, 50 or 100 meg.
Are services throttled back if there's a high demand and you're not getting the revenue? Are the actual speeds throttled back because of demand and cost?
Are you talking about this map specifically, the fixed wireless? Because that's not our company.
Just CenturyLink's internet speed. Okay, if say somebody's paying $60 a month for 10 megs or higher, and there's a lot of traffic on the internet and it's slowed down. Are you throttling back speeds based on when it gets higher demand? Does everybody get a slower speed because of the demand? And if that person was paying a higher cost, would they get higher speed?
No. So when a customer signs up with us, if we say, your lines are capable of getting just 10 meg, that's the speed that customers should be able to expect. And it doesn't matter if it's,
But it doesn't happen. In reality, it doesn't always happen.
It's not to say there couldn't be some technical reason either in the home or outside the home that's causing them to not get those speeds. Wireless network setup, configuration, computers, all these different things. I give the example, my next door neighbor, he was on 10 meg a couple years ago, and he kept complaining that he was only getting 1 meg. Well, I went over there and started doing some speed tests. I'm like, okay, he's getting 1 meg. So I turned off his wireless signal and plugged in just to the modem. All of a sudden I was getting exactly 10 meg. Come to find out, every time he was speed testing, it was usually one of his kids was watching Netflix or playing Xbox or something at the same time. So some of it is just education on, understanding that you can't be using a bunch of devices and do your speed test at the same time, or it's never going to show you get the full speed. But if you have any escalations like that, I'm happy to get them addressed and work with. We have a customer advocacy team that works with all of our departments to help issue or help resolve escalations like that.
Comments or questions? Anyone else?
So my summary is it's not adequate for use across the county in any area of the county. If you've got 3 kids playing Pokemon. And I want to do my homework upstairs, and I've got my live stream on a movie. So you have the capabilities to provide, but it's still not up to par. I'm really confused there.
So when it comes to CenturyLink internet, so if you're talking about our DSL, which is over the traditional copper lines, it's speed sensitive. So where we have one of our pieces of equipment out in the field, in order for us to get 25 meg down and 3 meg up, for us, that's our 40 meg package. So if you have our 40 meg download, you have 3 megs of upload. To get that, you need to be within about 3,500 feet of our equipment. As you get further out, your speeds will go down from there. So, you know, we have customers in the county that may have 80 or 100 meg over DSL, but they live close by the equipment. As you get further away, the speeds go down all the way to about 8,000 or 9,000 feet is how far we can get our 10 meg signal. So it just depends on how close you are to the equipment. If you're 8,000 feet away on 10 meg, no, the likelihood you can have 3 kids on Pokemon Go and you trying to do, you know, some work at the same time, yeah, that's where it could definitely struggle or just really buffer and not work well. So it just depends on where you're at and what house you're talking, what speed you can get. You know, comparing that to our cable competitors, they either have service or they don't. They only have one speed option, which is similar to, or one, you know, they're either served or not served, which is similar to our fiber to the home areas. If you can get service, we tell you you can either get 100 meg or a gigabit speed, but it doesn't matter how far you are from equipment. It's just a matter of, do we have fiber there or not?
So Spectrum is no better than what you have, or you're better than Spectrum, or Spectrum is better than you, or
I would say
where are you in comparison to the other providers?
I would say it has to go with just depending where you're at. If it's one of our fiber to the home neighborhoods, you know, I would put our stuff against them any day of the week. If there's an area where we only have 10 or 20 meg and Spectrum serves that area, you know, their starting speed is probably going to either be 100 meg or 200 meg. You know, people will tell you that their technology is a little different with just how they share bandwidth over an area. So not to say that their 100 meg is always better than our 40 meg product. There's some differences, and both technologies have advantages and disadvantages. You know, we were able to get further out into the community faster by using DSL, whereas, you know, where they've built, they can get good speeds, but they just have not built as far out in the community. And then, sorry, I had a call beeping in. Then when you look at our fixed wireless competitors, you know, they have technology or advantages we don't have, where, you know, they don't have to follow the way the roads go to serve a customer. You find some of these rural roads where you have one house over the stretch of a mile. That's never going to prove in to place fiber to one single home if you have to go a mile to feed them, where it might cost you $30,000 to $50,000 to pick up that one customer that's going to pay you $50 a month. But maybe there's a parallel road and maybe they're close by a tower where a fixed wireless solution. So it's going to take a combination of all technologies to really make sure we get to every home in the county and across the state.
Okay, I think you've answered my question. Good, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? This is informational part of the board, so I appreciate your update and look forward to further improvements.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item number 5, request to purchase voting equipment. Manager York, Ms. Jacobs.
Good morning, Commissioners. I am presenting this item on behalf of the Board of Elections, along with our Deputy Elections Director, Cindy Jacobs. And the Board of Elections is asking for the authority of the board to purchase some new voting equipment. The voting equipment that they have in place, the current system was purchased in 2006, and it's reaching its end of life expectancy. Right now, it's difficult to maintain parts and do maintenance on the machines. The new equipment includes 15 express vote machines, as well as an electionware computer, which are ADA compliant. And the cost of the new system is just under $59,000. So we're bringing this item before you. We do have some funds that we can use that have to be expended by the end of the fiscal year. That's the Help America Vote Act funding, which we call HAVA funds. We have $36,000 available to use from that funding source. We would need an additional $22,548, and that would be an expenditure that would need to be authorized from the fund balance to make up the difference there. So we are asking for approval of the voting equipment as well as an appropriation from fund balance in order to make the purchase. Cindy, did you have anything else you'd like to add? I know we have members of the Board of Elections here as
Yes,
well.
thank you for your time and consideration. I do have 4 of our 5-member board here, Mr. Becky Wynn, Jacqueline Booker, our chairperson, David Mitchell, and Ms. Thelma Lee. We are just bringing this before you. The timing is good. We have the HAVA funds available. This has been something our board has been considering for a while now. And like Ms. Hottie has said, we have had this equipment that we currently have since 2006. I did have 2 of your members come to the demo that we had here. And we would like your consideration in moving forward. That's why we're here. So
There's an upcoming demo, or there's already been one?
There's been 2 demos.
yes, there's been 2 demos. We had one in person here in the auditorium in February. And you attended that as well as Mr. Carroll. And then we also have an online demo that we sent the link out for you guys to participate if you wanted to.
So these HAVA funds are coming from the federal government, U.S. Election Assistance Commission. One was done 2018, the appropriations in 2018 and 2020. That where the money's coming from, these appropriations from the federal
Yes, from the Help America Vote
security, okay.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we accept the recommended action to purchase the voting equipment, new voting equipment.
Motion made to accept the proposal. Any further questions or discussion?
I'll chime in. I have spoken with Sherry as well as
Cindy.
Miss Sandy about this issue in the past, and they expressed concerns to me. So I'm in for it. Let's do it.
Any other comments? Motion, all in favor of motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is item number 6, revised 2020-21 budget ordinance. Word.
Talk through this one. Oh, good morning. I have a couple of items to present this morning that are the result of some new accounting standards that are in effect for the current fiscal year. This first item is a request for revisions to the fiscal year 2021's budget ordinance. One of the new accounting standards requires changes in how we account for fiduciary activities, which are transactions that involve oversight of money that belongs to individuals or others outside of the government itself. Prior to this new standard, counties were accounting for all fiduciary activities in trust and agency funds that do not require a budget, since they were more or less pass-through transactions. However, the Accounting Standards Board that governs how we account for and report financial information has established new guidance under statement number 84 regarding what constitutes fiduciary activities for accounting and financial reporting purposes. After consultation with the county's auditor regarding the impacts of this new standard, we have determined that 2 funds do not meet the criteria to remain as fiduciary funds and will now have to be reclassified as special revenue funds. This includes the DSS Trust Fund, now to be called the DSS Representative Payee Fund, and the Sheriff's Execution Fund, both highlighted in sections 8, 9, 12, and 13 of the budget ordinance. Since these are now to be reported as special revenue funds, which are budgetary funds, we are required to incorporate them into our current year's budget ordinance. The budget estimates provided represent a 5-year average of revenues and expenditures. Given that expenditures for these funds are 100% sourced with revenues that do not require local funding, I'm also requesting through some language in section 31 of the ordinance to provide me, as the finance director, with authorization to amend the budget for these two funds as necessary in order to stay within budgetary compliance throughout the year and at fiscal year end. This will only require an increase to the revenues and expenditures from time to time as required, should expenditures come in higher than anticipated. No transfers from the general fund or any other fund will ever be necessary for these two funds. In addition to these changes, we are also inserting some supplemental information related to fire tax in section 27 that was accidentally omitted back in July 2020 when the absence and lack of access to computer files required the recreation of this document as a result of the county cyber event. Although the omission of this information had no effect on the accuracy and relevance of fire tax approval within the budget ordinance, we are taking this opportunity to include the supplemental information as was originally intended. The changes I have just relayed to you are listed in summary near the bottom of your abstract, as well as highlighted in a copy of the revised 2020-21 budget ordinance that was also provided for your review. Can I answer any questions you may have regarding these requested changes?
Thank you for doing all these numbers.
Sure. It's kind of my job.
I know, it's a big job. It's a big job.
If you don't have any questions, I would ask that you adopt the current year's revised budget ordinance as presented.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we adopt the 2021 budget ordinance as revised and recommended.
We have a motion to adopt the ordinance as stated. Any further discussion or question? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And thank you and your department for the protection of taxpayer money and doing what we need to do to stay out of dressing in orange.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate
You do a
that.
good job. It's well documented by the plaques on the wall up there. But did an excellent job protecting taxpayer money. Appreciate it.
Unfortunately, I'm not through. I have one more. I have one more item.
I want to put it in my.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. All right. Well, this next item is related to another new accounting standard known as statement number 87 that is effective for fiscal year 2022's audit report. Unlike the one I just presented for the revised budget ordinance, this is actually a funding request to engage our current financial audit firm, Elliott Davis, to provide additional accounting services that will provide the necessary assistance for the implementation of this new standard that changes how leases are reported in the county's audit report. Although this does not take effect until next fiscal year, the calculations and analysis required to correctly account for the county's leases under the new standard will take time and resources that causes the need to begin this work now, so that our accounting processes for leases will be in place beginning July 1st, 2021. By now, most accountants and many other financial professionals are aware that a significant change is coming in lease accounting, considering that almost all entities lease vehicles or equipment or real estate. This update will have a far-reaching impact. In a nutshell, the Government Accounting Standards Board concluded that financial statement users who continually seek transparency and comparability could not obtain the information they needed on leases because current accounting guidance did not require leases to be presented in a way that would provide the information that users desire. The county currently has 36 lease agreements that auditors will review and determine if they meet the reporting requirements under this new standard. This review will include inspection of the specific terms and structure, implementation into the auditor's model, calculation and identification of how these impact the county's financial statements, and proposals of the necessary journal entry adjustments required to report these leases appropriately in the county's audit report. The state auditor requires that this contract be approved as a separate engagement from the regular financial audit. Therefore, we are presenting a contract for the board's consideration to engage the current auditors to perform these additional services for a cost of $13,200. This fee is based on their estimated time required by individuals assigned to assist the county with the evaluation of the leases and will be billed on an interim basis as the work is performed. I propose that this expenditure be sourced from undesignated contingency funds, which would leave you with a remaining balance of $15,671 for other future unanticipated costs. I'll be glad to answer any questions regarding this request.
What's the timeline on completing, how long it takes for this?
That's a great question. I actually thought about that question, that I might get that question. And I think that the last time I talked with the auditors, or when I talked to them recently about this, it sounded like that it would take them about 3 months. So I don't anticipate it will take that long. The goal is to have what we need in place starting July the 1st, so that we're operating under that new standard.
We have to do this.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Mr. Chair, just for public record, has our attorney, has he reviewed the contract, Elliot?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Further questions, comments? Okay, what's the pleasure of this board? Have a motion to approve the request as presented. Any further comments or questions? Not all in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. At this point, I, as chairman, do not have a report. Further comments? And you go.
I just wanted to mention 2 meetings that are happening this week that have had special notices sent out. One is a meeting of PCBIC. They're meeting tomorrow at 4 p.m. And the other is the Home Builders Association. They are meeting tomorrow also at 7 p.m. And I expect that we'll have 3 commissioners at that Home Builders Association meeting. So just wanted to announce those publicly. Thank you. Nothing else.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Bergier. No report. Commissioner Palmer. No, sir. I have nothing further. Mr. Ginger.
Just want to mention the task force is moving along, meeting every Thursday at 4 p.m. Right now, we've gone through 2 of the presentations from other boards, and so we're going through another 2 weeks of presentations on economic development models, and then we'll have a couple weeks of wrap up on that. And the other thing is, I haven't talked with the planning director yet, but we're still working on the the water issue that we have to deal with as far as funding it, either paying for it or finding in kind properties to. So I haven't had an update recently, so I'm sure that the staff is still working on it, but that's just still at the forefront. That's a big item for the county from an expense standpoint and an environmental standpoint.
Commissioner Sims.
I'd just like to thank the city and those who participated in the festival this past weekend. I know it was a success. I hope people here and people that are listening, I hope you had an opportunity to come out of town where we had the food trucks. It was a hit. It was a lot of people, and I think we'll see that happen again. It's all about trying to bring people uptown, open back up, and have our merchants open, and just help with promoting Uptown Roxborough Group. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you all very much. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to, go ahead, Charlie.
I'll sound anxious.
Yeah.
No discussion on that topic, I'm sure. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.